They're elderly, and, once you get up in the higher bracket of age group, your health is always taking a chance. And both of them, their health had gone down, and especially for the father, wasn't looking good at all. And, there's a T-shirt that says, "Old age is not for wimps." That's actually kind of very true. Life gets very precarious when you get older. And he was having some medical problem, and it was not looking good. They were going to go in for surgery, but he wasn't expected to survive. So, for her, this was very tense. And before he gets wheeled into the operating room, the mother, and they've been married for over 60 years. Over 60 years married, and this amazed me. Before he wheels away, she gets up she holds the bed and she says, "Now, promise me, you'll come back. You have to promise me." And that puts him in an odd position. So of course he says yes. But it just amazed me. After 60 years of marriage, I thought you'd get on each other's nerve, but apparently she still wants him around. And so they have the surgery, and he survives. And when he's getting wheeled back to his room, he wakes up, and she's there, and she brightens up, and she goes to him and says, "Thank you for keeping your promise." And so later, he's talking to his daughter, and he said, "I'm sure I died in the surgery. I'm sure I died, and I went to heaven. I saw heaven." And she said, "Well, what was heaven like?" And he says, "Oh, it was beautiful." And he said, "There's all these people, and they welcomed me, and they showed me a chair with a little crown on it. And they said, 'This is your chair, and you're welcome whenever you want. You're welcome.'" But he was concerned about his wife, but he was convinced that he had died. But he liked the image that, whenever he wants, he's welcomed into heaven. And I just like that story for this reason. It's a great image for the Ascension, because in the Ascension, we have this line from St. Augustine that was in the opening prayer, "Where the head is gone, the body will follow." And the head of the church is Christ. And Christ is the right hand of the Father. He's there. And the idea is that he's holding a place for us at the table in the kingdom of God. At the table of God, we who are part of his body, we have a place at the table. And I like that image, that it's waiting for us. And in the Feast of the Ascension, we celebrate that is the direction our life is going. And even this idea of direction, I like it starts at baptism, and it really continues through our life in the Ascension, that we're moving a little bit closer and closer and closer to the great feast in the kingdom of God. That's where our lives are moving to. And it starts at baptism, and the symbol, just because I like these symbols, the reason why we use a shell at a baptism is just for this reason. The shell symbolized somebody who's starting or on a journey. And in ancient times, they didn't have North Face or, Coleman camping gear. What you would do if you're taking a journey is you would bring a shell and you'd wear it around your neck. Sounds strange, but the shell, it could work as a shovel. It could work as kind of your food to eat with, to hold food, or a plate where you could eat from it. In very primitive times, it was kind of a multi-purpose Swiss Army knife. And so the image of a shell, believe it or not, is somebody who's taking a journey, because you would need one. It becomes your plate. And so the early Christians picked that up, that we baptize with a shell because the day you're baptized, it symbolized that you're taking this journey. Your life has this journey, and hopefully, week after week after week, you're moving closer to the place your life will end up, which is the table of the Lord. You'll follow Christ in the Ascension. And what I dislike, this actually kind of annoys me, is, and I know this sounds awful, people whose life has no direction. All it is stagnation. That kind of annoys me, and here's what I mean by it. So 20 years ago, yeah, it was 20-some years ago, I was a young priest, and this lawyer who was about my age, and this amazed me that I can remember this, but I will not remember my appointments for tomorrow, but if you tick me off, I will remember it for the next 20 years. It's an Irish problem. You know what Irish Alzheimer's is? You forget everything but your grudges. So I'm this newly ordained priest, and this lawyer, who's about my same age, he says, well, is religion really necessary to get into heaven? Can't you just be polite? He says, I'm a polite guy. I'm decent, but I don't want to go to church. That ticked me off because it's such a lawyer's trick to make it, this dichotomy of either or. And what annoys me is that, when he says, this really annoys me, he says, isn't it good enough just to be polite? Way to go for mediocrity. Way to really push yourself into mediocrity. You can't push yourself a little bit more to be better and better and better. You're going to go for the low bar of just saying, well, I'm polite. That drives me up the wall. And the sin against the ascension is the fact that really you're just going to try and lowball it of saying, well, I'm polite. In celebrating the ascension, we're hoping we started this journey at baptism, and we're moving closer and closer. We're trying to be better. That's what the ascension celebrates, if we're part of it. And for us, this also drives me up the wall. Baptism celebrates the beginning of the journey, not the finish. So also, kind of fundamentalist Christians sometimes will do this, and this drives me up the wall. Are you saved? I hate that because it makes it sound like baptism is the end of the race. Baptism isn't. It's the beginning of the race. So my answer would be, well, I'm saved, but I have a long ways to go. But do you get when they do I'm saved? They're just saying that they've already crossed the finish line. You haven't. We've begun the journey. And the most important part is that we're moving forward. And one of our parishioners, Mike McSweeney, died this week. Great guy. You just couldn't help but love him, even though he was very annoying. He was just very lovable. But he was starting to fade. He came to daily mass last week. It took him a half an hour just to get from the parking lot into mass, and he missed mass. He really had become really slow. So they take him to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, there's nothing we can do for you. So his friend Jerry's driving him home, and Jerry says, the doctor suggested hospice, and Mike, no way is he going to do that. So Jerry's driving him home, and Jerry says, Mike, none of your friends really want to, come to your house and see you dead. Why don't you just consider having hospice come to check in on you? And Mike, this just cracks me up because I love this, he gets upset and he says, absolutely. And I said, stop the car, I'm going to walk. He's on a walker. It took him a half an hour to get, of course Jerry doesn't stop the car, but I just love the fact that he says absolutely not. 24 hours later, he called hospice. It just takes him a little while to agree, but I love that. But the thing that I always felt sorry about Mike is Mike, when he was younger, supposedly living in New York, lived a wild life. And actually, I met somebody who just happened to live in New York who knew Mike, 50 years ago or more than that. And I said, well, Mike always seems apologetic that he was kind of wild. And I love this woman because her face lights up and says, he was wild. And, Mike actually had this regret, and which to me is kind of silly because who he was when he was 20 is not who he was when he was, I don't know how old he was, 75 or 80. He was a great guy. So yeah, he started the journey off and it was a little rocky, but he ascends and becomes this great guy at the end. What we celebrate in Ascension is that our life is moving a little bit closer and closer to that great feast, that we have a place at the table. Let's push ourselves to get there. And in the creed, when we say, he ascended to the right hand of the Father, that phrase, right hand of the Father, that actually means something. it's political language, actually. So in ancient times, the person that sat next to the king, on the right hand of the king, actually got all the work done. The king orders it, and the person on the right hand of the king, you never really hear the king speak. The person on the right, he starts ordering people around to get whatever the king wants done. And so the idea there is that the head of the church, Christ, he's the one who's in heaven directing everything. So the ascension doesn't celebrate a loss of leadership, quite the opposite. It's this intensification of leadership. Now Christ, instead of just being limited to the apostles, for 40 days after the resurrection, he appeared every Sunday. After 40 days, he ascends, so that he's just not limited to one little group. He's directing everybody throughout the world. So when it says he ascended, if you look at artwork, it looks like he's floating into the clouds. I hate that image. When it says that he ascended, it means he's moved beyond time and space so that Christ can govern the entire body in all times, in all places. And we're here to do the work. We're here to do the work. And that's why we have graduations. When you graduate from high school, it supposedly says, now you're ready to be on your own. And no offense, your parents failed you if you graduate from high school and you can't live on your own. When you graduate from college, it means you can be, actually, so does high school, a productive member of society. So the Ascension also celebrates that, our lives are moving forward, we hope, but also we're taking on greater and greater responsibility. And so the woman who went down to California and tended to her parents, when she comes back, she's kind of depressed. And she came to Mass last Sunday. She's a little depressed because, it's clear that her parents don't have long. And her husband are leaving Mass, and it's at night, and they're leaving, and they look up in the trees, and they see something. And they go and examine it, and it's this wind chime with a bell on the end, and they're called Ben's bells. Have you guys ever heard of Ben's bells? Okay, I had never heard of it either. And what it is this woman, kind of sad, she lost her child named Ben, and she was depressed. She lost her child, and she decides, I've got to create more kindness in the world. And she says, it didn't replace my son, but it did make me feel better. And I was listening to the radio yesterday, and Garrison Keillor was on, and he said, if your heart is open, every day your heart is going to be broken. And your only response is to create more love and kindness in the world. Otherwise, what you'll do is become irresponsible and close your heart to all love. And so they see this Ben's bell, and she said, it really did make me feel better, this little pledge. Because when you hear the bell ring, it's this idea that you're supposed to bring more kindness into the world. And so, last weekend, I guess, people make them who want to make this pledge to make more kindness, and they hide them throughout Meridian. Her and her husband found one in our parking lot. And she said, it made me feel a lot better that, I might be losing my parents, but my response is to bring more love and kindness into the world. And so on the Feast of the Ascension, we're kind of the same way. We celebrate at baptism, we start this journey closer and closer to the table in the kingdom, and we hope our lives has this direction. It's making movement and deeper and becoming better people. But it also celebrates that really Christ is trying to lead the church. We're urging us that we're the ones who are responsible. We're responsible now. We have everything we need to make this world a better place. And our only response should be more kindness, compassion, and love.